Namaste, everyone. Welcome to the Cārvāka podcast. This is your host, Kushalmehra. All right, time for yet another session with Abhijit Iyer Mitra. So, for those who don't know, this is the third one in the series on architecture. The first two were on temple architecture, and then we followed up with a detailed Q&A. Today, we're going to be talking about military architecture. Abhijit, welcome back.
Greetings to one and all. I'm so happy to be back with you talking about something I love. Military architecture. So, the only reason I got into history as a kid was my earliest memories are living in Robert Clive's own house. So when my mother was the collector of Cuddalore, South Arcot district, we lived in Robert Clive's own house. And nearby there was a fort. And well, it wasn't a fort, it was more battlements and things like that. And I always used to be scared off from there, saying there are ghosts in there and things like that. And obviously, when you're told not to do something, you end up doing things. And that's how I got into a whole load of history, and specifically military history and forts. So today, I think what we're going to talk about specifically is why. First, I'm going to show you a bunch of forts with very little commentary. And then I'm going to tell you a lot of reasons as to why we see what we're seeing out here. Okay. Some of it, there's absolutely no explanations for. But I remember when we did the previous videos on architecture, one of the most common things was, it's not that we couldn't do it, it's that we chose not to do it. There was no requirement for it. And what I'm going to show you with military architecture specifically is the kind of obsolescence that seems to have set in. And even when that obsolescence had not set in, when you had peer competitors coming in from Europe, this was no longer Turks, you were still extraordinarily obsolete. So there's a fundamental lack of knowledge of trends and methods and things like that. So what I'm going to show you now is a set of images. I'll keep bringing them back every now and then, to sort of, क्या कहते हैं, to make my point. But Kushal, can we start screen sharing, please?
Okay, sure. Sure. Okay. So where is it?
I'm sorry, I've got just so much kachra lined up here.
So as you see, while Abhijit is great at reading and speaking, he's not great at screen sharing.
I am not. I want you to look at this fort. And I want you guys to guess how old this is.
Okay, yeah. Everybody Kushal? In the live chat, start guessing how old it is.
I'm going to count down 1 minute.
I'm not gonna guess. I'm very bad at these.
I want you to notice several things out here. You can see the moat. Can you see my mouse moving? Or my cursor moving?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
First, I want you to see the moat. Second, I want you to see the slope of the wall. Can you see, even when you're looking at the battlement here, you can see the slope of the wall?
Yeah.
Correct. Yeah. Can you see the holes in the towers?
Yeah, it's like a ventilation or something.
Well, it's to throw things down on attackers. You can see individual towers here and here in the external. Then what happens is there is a second line of fortifications here.
Yes.
A concentric fortification. It's called a cyclopean wall. There are different terms for it. I mean, Some people classify Cyclopean as something completely different. And here there is a much closer set of towers, right? You can see from the material used that it is mud brick. Okay. Now I think 1 minute is over.
Yeah.
So I want you guys, what were the guesses you got?
So I'll tell you what all the guesses. So the hilarious one was Treta Yug. That was just for a joke, but it was funny. I had to start with Treta Yug. So what do we have over here? Somebody says 11th century. Someone says 2000 years. Someone says 1900s. I'm just sharing it on the screen so that you get a fair idea of what people have said. 1100. One is 1000. 400-year old. 300 years. I mean, 1500 years. It's a variety of answers. So
Okay.
tell us the real answer.
It is 3,860 years old.
Oh, damn.
Okay. It is the fortress of Buhen in Egypt, in deep southern It's now in Sudan. And the pharaohs used to use this as a base to control the gold trade. The exact construction of the second wall around the first one happened sometime around 1400 BC, so 3,400 years. It was abandoned around 1000 BC. Now, I notice all the improvements that I showed you one after the other in this. The sloping walls, the little holes. I'm not going to use technical terms in this at all because I don't want to confuse people with technical terms. Imagine a 3,860-year-old fortress in the middle of the Nubian desert. It is truly remarkable. If you go and do a Google map search of the fortress of Buhen, you will see how large it is. And mind you, the Egyptians built something like 20 or 30 of these kinds of fortresses. They built these fortresses in the Sinai. They built these fortresses up in Israel. Not of this scale, because at that time, the threat from that side wasn't all that much. Mistakenly, because a few hundred years later, the Hyksos would invade from there. But mainly it was Nubia. Nubia, because that is where all the gold came from. All the Egyptian gold mines were in Nubia, what we today call Sudan. Okay. Now, I want you to keep this at the back of your mind. This is the most important thing you will see. The moat, the sloping walls, the holes in the thing, the concentric forts, etc., etc., etc. Now, the second image I want you to see is this one. ये क्या है ये अब
तो वो ले आना, मैं स्क्रीन पे अपने आप ले आऊंगा क्योंकि मुझे वो मिनिएचर भी दिखता है ताकि people don't have to see your scrolling on the screen.
हाँ. तो right. So what I'll do is ये कहाँ गया भाई? Damn. हाँ.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is when Abhijit Iyer Mitra reminds you that he's growing old.
Yes, exactly. Okay, now you can share screen.
All right. Hey, this is fascinating, man.
When was this built?
Let me first enlarge my own screen so that I see it properly. The brickwork, this is also mud bricks. I mean, I don't know. I could be wrong.
Well, it's inside it's filled with rubble. Externally, it's stone.
Yeah, the walls clearly are stonework, like where the people are standing, the walls on their side towards.
So it's skirted with stone, and there's a reason for it. Stone shatters on impact. I chose this picture very specifically because on the top left here, you can see it's rubble work inside.
Yes.
Right. So when rubble work is attached together, it tends to have a shock absorber effect. Where think of it as a crumple zone. This is the crumple zone.
Yeah.
This would be like the ambassador. High impact, the stones would shatter if the force was heavy enough. This fort is the first fort that we know of in India that has the features of the Buhen fort. It was built around 1330. It is Tughlaqabad fort.
Wow, one live viewer actually got it almost spot on, 1321.
Correct. It could be 1321. I'm just going in this thing.
I know
I'm
you're
also
giving
going
the
to
guesstimate, not the exact date.
correct. Now, what happens with Tughlaqabad Fort? I want to show you certain other features of this particular fort. Is that you will see it has a lot of the same features that the Buhen Fort did. For example, hang on, I've tried to be extremely careful with using imagery because ये बहुत इसका problem हो जाता है.
Now I'll put it.
Okay, share this please.
Yeah, it's on the screen.
Okay, so what you see here is there's a moat here. You see that sloping wall.
Yes, I can.
Okay, you see the same, like in Buhen, you see the same rounded turrets.
Yes.
And what you see here is a concentric fort, that behind every outer wall, there is an inner, this thing here. This is the inner fort, and this is here is the outer fort. So imagine from 1860 BC to 1313 AD. How many years?
Yeah, to repeat it. You said from 1800s, right, to 13, so 500.
From 1860 BC.
Oh, yeah, to 1300. So that's a humongous gap.
Correct. Right. So you're looking at something like almost what? 3,000 something years? Almost a 3,000 year gap.
Yeah.
That's how long it takes for all these techniques to come into India.
My goodness.
Right. Now, let me show you certain other important things. I want to show you why each of these features is important. So the first one is this fort is called the Crac des Chevaliers.
Man,
can you see
beautiful.
This?
Yeah.
Yeah. It's in Syria. And there's another image of the Crac des Chevaliers somewhere here that I saved. Oh dear. Yes, here. Okay. This is one view. This is the external view. Okay.
That is one of the most beautiful pictures.
Exactly. It's been destroyed heavily because of the civil war and things like that. This was built sometime around the 1100s. It's a crusader fortress during immediately after the first crusades by the crusader states that existed in the Levant. Now you see a lot of very similar things. First, you see these little things here. They're almost like little protrusions within the wall. Right. That is so that you can actually drop things. These are holes below them. They were a significant engineering achievement. There are holes here as well, so that you can drop things directly down on people. You can still see the oil
like
stains.
Trying to climb the fort, you drop shit so that they go down.
Can you see the sort of, you can still see old oil stains and things like that. This is where hot oil or burning oil would have been poured down on people trying to climb up.
Fascinating.
Okay. Just like the fortress of Buhen, what you see is there's a bridge connecting it. So it's not exactly a moat, but it's similar to a moat because the entrance is much higher. It is not a dugout moat. It is an in-effect moat because the actual entrance is up here. It's at a height of about 30, 40 feet. Not 30, 40, maybe about 20, 25 feet. Okay. So it is an in-effect moat. You see these battlements. Now, why are these towers here? Because when people are climbing here and you are looking over here to throw things down, people out here, the besiegers, would keep showering arrows and things on you. So you never knew that if you were throwing something down on the guy here, you wouldn't get hit with something in your face. Which is why they built these protected towers and these things jutting out so that they can still be hidden here and still drop things directly down below. these towers performed a different thing. They would attack the attackers from the side. People would drop things from here, and from here, arrows would be shot on this angle and on this angle. On both angles, they would be shot. Okay. Now, assume that the outer fort fell. बाहर का fort उनपे उन्होंने कब्जा कर लिया. Then what would happen is, look what happens here. You come in here into this area, क्योंकि ये capture हो गया है. This part has been captured and you've come in here. What happens here is, you've got nowhere to hide. So these guys are constantly going to keep showering missiles and projectiles down on you. And there's nothing you can do short of climbing back outside the wall. In effect, the cost of taking the outer wall is just as high as the cost of trying to take the inner wall.
So that would be a huge deterrence, right?
Exactly. So it becomes very problematic. Now you see this thing here, the sloping wall, which you saw at Buchen as well. You can see from here, from this tower, the slope there. What it does is, you remember the Roman assault tower kind of thing, which you see in lots of movies. If you bring, by any chance, assume you manage to climb in here and construct some kind of temporary fortification, what will happen is you have to build an assault tower here to assault inside. Now, what happens here is, there is no way the drawbridge of that assault tower can ford this entire distance. तुम्हारा tower इधर से इधर होगा, but then the offset is so great. Ladder, you can't have a bent ladder. The ladder can either go like this, or it can go like this. If it goes like this, this particular part, you're away, it has no support. With 5-10 people, it cracks. Because it's a wooden ladder, remember? So it cracks. Did you understand that part?
Yeah.
Okay. I'll show you why it cracks. देखो, ये ऐसे है. I'm sorry. This is the slope. And this is the upper, this thing. So if you keep a ladder like this, so go like assume this. I'm keeping my cigarette. Assume my cigarette is the ladder. I'm Center keeping it like this.
Center
if more than 5 or 6 people, it goes like this.
Yeah.
ऐसे हो जाता.
Center पे pressure आएगा और टूट जाएगा.
Exactly. This is flexible. A ladder is not. So there were a lot of thought put into these forts on seeing to it. You simply could not overcome these things. Now remember, forts cost a lot of money. What the main thing I want you to check out in this is, this fort, if you show this image again, Kushal, this fort could be held even if there were about 10 to 15,000 attackers, which we know for the 1100s was a very big number of it was a huge army by the 1100 standards in the Middle East. This fort could be held by about 100 to 150 men. Okay, the stores in there were enough to feed soldiers for 10 years. The water there was inexhaustible because this was built on top of a well. Okay, now why would they build a fort like this which wasn't protecting a city? What they did was they would put it all around cities. So when you go to because cities are huge, you can't invest that much money in individual forts like this kind of a wall can't be built around a massive city like Jerusalem. So what would happen is Jerusalem would be at the center. All the attacking army would come and surround Jerusalem, and these forts would be uncaptured with garrisons, and they would come from the outside and attack the attacking army from behind. So it would be a double encirclement, like a target ka sign hota hai na? The red in the center is Jerusalem, the white outside is Saladin's forces besieging it, and the red outside is Crusader troops from all these super forts coming and besieging that. So remember, these secondary forts, as they're called, I mean, this Crac de Chevalier that I showed you is actually considered a super fortress. One of the reasons that Saladin accelerated his program to capture Crusader territory was because they were building super fortresses. They knew they could never capture these super fortresses. And so they went engaged in preventive war to see to it that no more. They managed to build about 6 or 7 of these. And Crac de Chevalier was the one that was completely completed. Others like Kerak Castle and things, before they built the outside wall, Saladin and Baibars and all these people would attack immediately, saying you're destroying deterrence and not prevent and destroy it before the fortifications were complete. That's how threatened they were by this.
Got it.
Right. Now, these forts are virtually, well, they seemed, Crac was never ever captured. Baibars took it only by cheating. He sent a pigeon. He forged a letter saying from the Knights Templar or the Hospitallers. I forget. I think it was a Hospitaller fort. He forged a letter from the Master Hospitaller saying, "Please surrender. There is no army coming to relieve you." And so when the commandant of the fort got that letter, he was like, "Acha bhai, chalo surrender karo," and he surrendered the fort. Okay. The problem here is, there were no known countermeasures to these Crusader super forts. They also didn't come up in Europe, surprisingly enough, because the cost was too high. The extraction wasn't high enough. Remember, the Crusader kingdoms were more amalgamated than deeply feudal Europe at that point of time, where the land holdings were tiny. If you actually watch The Kingdom of God, it's a horribly inaccurate movie. Everything about it is inaccurate. The siege tactics, the story, everything is inaccurate. But one thing that is accurate is how small and not wealthy Europe is at this time, and how exceedingly wealthy the Middle East is at this time. Okay. And a lot of secondary children of nobility would come here to seek their fortune, and they created much bigger consolidated realms with far greater revenues than you could in Europe. So in Europe, per square kilometer, you have more forts than any other part of the world, but they're all third-rate forts. Overwhelmingly, during the feudal period, they're fairly third-rate forts. Now, I want you to see how one certain invention changes everything. And what is that change? One second, let me just shut all these windows. That invention is gunpowder. Because none of these forts would have been able to withstand gunpowder. Now, if you remember, in one of our previous podcasts, I've discussed this. Gunpowder is the father of the Industrial Revolution. Coal, which is a component of gunpowder, was used in the 1600s for coal energy, which was the application of chemical energy to the production process. Warfare, this had been invented almost 400 years earlier, the application of chemical energy to the war fighting process. और इसमें क्या होता है कि sorry, one second. How to make this smaller? Okay. Sorry, one second. Huh?
No problem.
I'm not very good at. So this starts off in 1422. We have cannons before this. We start seeing cannons in the European battlefield in around the 1300s. The Battle of Crécy was the first known use of a firearm. The Battle of Crécy is around 1311 or something like that, if I'm not forgotten. Let me just check. Battle of Crécy. It's part of the 100 Years' War, 1346. That is the first known use of firearms in a European battlefield. But by 1422, these 3 cannons are in Berlin. These 3 cannons are from 1422. When you look at them, Kushal, or audience, what do you see about them?
Okay, point to the 3 again. I just want to be making sure.
These three in the foreground. 1, 2, 3.
So the difference
What
between
do
the
you see
three
about?
you're talking.
No.
What?
Tell me something that you see about just out of the top of your mind. What
I
strikes you
don't.
about these three?
The front part, obviously the diameter is different and the design is different. So in terms of the capacity of the ball that they put inside would be different. So
Take.
I guess the
Okay.
damage they do.
Okay. No. Partially yes, but what I wanted you to see was how small these cannons are.
Mm-hmm.
They're tiny, and you see this
Okay.
part here. It's actually
Mm-hmm.
there in all three of these because I've actually seen these. You can't see it here. I've actually seen these three cannons.
Okay.
You see this round thing here.
Uh-huh.
It's meant to attach it to a cart.
Okay, got it.
So the Europeans were already thinking about mobility at this point of time.
Got it.
Extremely mobile cannons that were capable of packing a huge punch on the battlefield.
Mm-hmm.
Very, very important innovation. ठीक है? अब इसमें क्या होता है? By 1430, you have elevated, by 1430, the standardization of the cannon starts. So,
Mm-hmm.
it's a standardized length and a standardized bore. They have different names for each different bore and things like that. But that's where you're at. And you see what's happening out here. The decorations are going. It's
Mm-hmm.
becoming more and more functional, less and less decorative. You see the decorations out here. कितना effort लगाया है इसमें सुंदर सा
Yeah.
decoration करने के लिए.
Yeah.
But in this one, it's completely gone. There's very little. This is just the maker's mark and things like that.
Yeah.
But it's
So
mostly gone.
basically, with more and more requirement, the production gets more and more streamlined. All the inefficiencies are being taken out.
Exactly. Now, I want to show you a cannon at this point of time from the Ottoman period that was used in the 1452 siege of Constantinople. One second. 1450. Constantinople siege cannon. Now, I need a image which is relative. I was looking for an image with a human being in front, which you can't find. Okay, but no problem. But ye dekh lo, these are actually
Tell me which one you want to
incredibly
show, and
big
I'll...
guns.
Holy moly!
Yeah, these were Turkish cannons used in the siege of Constantinople. Now, every military book, video that you'll see, which mostly made by the Turks, will tell you that they were incredible cannons that, destroyed everything, this, that, absolute bullshit. They were extraordinarily useless cannons. They took
How would they
too
move
much to
these? Were they
transport.
movable?
Yeah, so it was ridiculous. They did move them, but the range wasn't high enough. See, the range of a cannon is determined by how long the bore is. Okay, why is that the case? Well, it's very simple. If you look at gunpowder, you're igniting it. The longer it burns, the more it throws, as in the longer the explosive power, the further it throws the projectile. मेरा चेहरा ले आ बे, screen मत ले आ. The longer the bore, the greater time the explosion has to mature and it pushes it out further, which is why range is determined not just by the circumference of the cannon, but also by the length, especially the length, the total volume that it can hold. Okay, but the length is extremely important. Here, they weren't that useful. They had to be taken up very, very close to the wall because the belief at that point of time was the bigger the cannonball, the more the damage. That isn't actually the case. There is a lot of videos you will find on YouTube, which will show you it is speed that matters much more, that causes a lot more damage than the size of the projectile.
Got it.
Okay. So the Turks at this point, 1452, still don't really seem to get it.
Mhm.
I've shown you cannons from 1422, 1430, and 1450.
Go
The
ahead.
Turks are already on the technological back foot. And you know what is amazing? Why the Europeans have gotten ahead at this point is because of churches. Churches need bells. All the cities in Europe were competing to have higher towers and bigger bells on the bell tower. And it was the bell casting bronze technology that they translated into gun technology.
Mhm.
There is a reason Europe made that rapid change. By 1330, when the Battle of Crécy was fought, European gun technology was on par with China and Turkey up to a point.
Mhm.
By just 100 years later, the Europeans were way ahead of the Turks already in terms of tactics, in terms of thinking. So see, you can bring hundreds of small guns like the one I showed you onto the battlefield, which have an extremely long range, rather than one or two big guns that don't have a long enough range. Right? There are all the statistics. I've got all the images in Latin, so you can actually see the gun measures. I'll send it to you if anybody's interested. You can see the Europeans made a very conscious decision not to go in for these Turkish style big guns because they realized that they were inutile in terms of warfare on the battlefield. Okay, na? But now I want to show you Indian cannons. No, not this one. Wait, this one. Okay. Can you see this?
Yes.
Okay, this is the Bada Top in Bidar. Again, completely useless.
Yeah, this is like
You
the
look at the sheer
Turkish one,
size
right?
of it. It's like a Turkish one, exactly. It's militarily, it's inutile. It can't be moved anywhere. 50 tons. Can you beat that? It weighs 50 tons.
ये
कहाँ ले
कौन
जाओगे?
उठाएगा
कैसे ले
इसको?
जाओगे इसे?
ये कि-
Exactly.
And what,
It
they would
was
use
so
elephants to draw these
useless.
shit?
Yeah, they actually used to use elephants to draw this shit. It required 10, 15 elephants to draw it, so you couldn't even use it in the battlefield. If you remember in the earlier podcast when we were talking about the Battle of Talikota,
Mm-hmm.
you remember how I told you that that Bada Top Malik ke Maidan or something in Maidan could not be used because it was so huge. This
Mm-hmm.
is the Jaivanna cannon in Jaipur.
And बड़ी कर दो फिर मैं लाता हूँ screen पे. Okay, now I'll put it. Okay, this is useless.
It is completely useless. But
You
guess
know
when
what this
this
sounds like?
particular
Honestly, Abhijit, this is the Indian Rajas into some sort of a VV measuring contest.
exactly, it's basically a my penis is bigger than yours contest.
Yeah,
This is
exactly.
called the Jaivanna cannon. But guess, imagine when this cannon was made.
I don't know, 1500s?
1726.
They made this shit in
Yeah,
1720s.
yeah. This is in Jaipur. It's in Jaipur Fort.
Then this is not for safety. This is just like, look, I have the biggest cannon.
Correct. So see, there was no thought. There was no thought being put into the actual this thing. This was another cannon. It apparently weighs 80 tons. It's
Holy
called the
shit.
Bidar. I've written 18 tons. It's actually 80 tons. Look at it. It's here they've got the idea that length equals greater explosive power of the gunpowder that you're using, but they made it so big it's tactically inutile.
Pardon my ignorance. I just have a question. So so was the logic like if we have these big cannons, we can hit a longer distance? I don't know anything about these things.
Exactly. The problem was they were not doing a cost benefit analysis of what is uh, 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 if we bring these bigger cannons to play, how do we transport them, what is the mobility factor, etc., etc., etc. Whereas the Europeans are thinking about this very, very early on. They are already thinking, their tactical thinking at this point is so advanced that it's not even funny. Now, this is the cannon that was used at the Battle of Talikota. It's called the Malike Maidan. Look at this cannon. It was not used, it was brought to the Battle of Talikota, but apparently it wasn't used at the Battle of Talikota. You see
know
the
what?
trend out here, right?
Yeah. So I'll give you a fighter's analogy, right? So in martial arts, there is this thing like, okay, you have heavyweights, but beyond a point, you reach a segment that people think it's there's this myth of, oh, if the mountain of Game of Thrones would be able to be in a position to smash any human being, but what they don't realize is the mountain would get tired, and if somebody is relatively lighter, even though they are like 200
Exactly.
250 pounds, they would beat the crap out of the mountain eventually.
Exactly right. And this is where you realize what happens at the third Battle of Panipat. What wins the third Battle of Panipat for Ahmad Shah Abdali? It is the Zamburaks. It is the artillery on the back. It is small artillery on the back of camels that Ahmad Shah Abdali brought. See, they're constantly stressing mobility, 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 mobility. Okay, we are constantly stressing size to the point of making it logistically impossible to either move it or supply it or anything like that. ठीक है ना? Now, the
This is
thing
exactly
about
like in the first time or in one of our previous series where Turkic invasions, you said we would use elephants in battlefields which were completely useless.
exactly, exactly, right? So इसमें it keeps becoming highly problematic after a point where over a period of 300-400 years, you are not learning your lessons, and you are not even doing anything. You are losing battles, but you don't have a system where you are uh, uh, implementing corrective measures. You are not even able to analyze. You remember we talked about this during the horse episode. They went on losing they still don't get the economics, and they're still not able to change the economics of it. To be fair, economics at that time was not an extremely well developed art, but definitely, battle strategy was. Now, why did I show you these cannons? Because cannons brought an end to fortifications. All those impressive fortifications you saw, the very nature of the fortification started changing at this point. What happens is that this chap, what is he? Charles II or Henry II, in his Italian campaign of the 1450s, he brings up this, his father technically improvised and brought these cannons mated to carts. It was considered the first great military revolution. Mating cannons to carts, making them small, he could bring up 50, 60 cannons against a wall. Before, to take a fort used to take 2-3 months. But when he comes in the 1400s into Italy, he is able to destroy Italian forts in the space of 2 to 3 days. Right? Because forts are meant to, up to this point, are meant to withstand catapults. That's still kinetic energy. Okay, it's stone on stone. There is no application of chemical energy out here. It is at best catapults or, Roman style ballistas or, the Crusader style trebuchets. Cannons bring the end of old style fortification. So fortification moves on. And these are some of the earliest new style fortifications that you see. This is the fort of Palmanova. Leonardo da Vinci is the one who writes about it. Can you see this?
Yeah.
Okay.
People might
Now
have
see
to
what's
enlarge their screens, like I have, so then they can.
right. Now I want you to see what's happening out here. This is the city. Okay. But there is now a star fort. There is no towers on the fort. It is called a star fort like this. You can see the star marked out. Every entrance has a second detached wall in front of it. Okay. And further on from there, can you see this trench here? There is a
Yes.
further, each tip of the star has a second tip of the star protecting it outside. And these are not high, these are deep. Okay, these are deep. The earliest part of this, which is this part, was constructed in the 1400s. The outer part was refined in the 1500s as the knowledge of this technology moved on. Now, why is this important? Because when you are outside here, when you are attacking, you remember I told you everybody has to throw things down on people. Here, you don't have to throw things down on people. All the battlements are on the side. You can just keep shooting because the cannons, this is a recessed fort. You don't really have to do anything. Let me show you this. This would be, look at the side view here. It isn't high. It isn't high at all. What they're doing is they're using the earth as a kind of a crumple zone. जो गाड़ी में crumple zone होता है ना, जो तुमको save करता है. You can just keep firing at earth. You can't do anything. The defenders are here. It's open, but they'll keep shooting at you. If you try attacking them from here, they will shoot at you with cannons from here. If you try attacking from here, they shoot at you with cannons from here and here. Basically, what it is doing is, it's a completely new way of thinking. These are not size-efficient forts. Can you see how much depth? Before, a wall was like 20, 30 feet deep. Even if it was a double wall, it was the maximum 40 feet deep. Here, the set of walls around it are at least 100 to 150 feet deep, multiple walls. If you take one, you've not taken the others. If you take this, you haven't taken anything else. What it is basically doing is it is not giving an attacker any angle to hide. His back is always exposed to you. Right? So he has to cover both his front and his back. It makes sieges virtually impossible at this point. Plus, what happens is you are on, there is a moat out here. So it's actually quite wet ground. Okay. So you can't even move cannons up very close and things like that because cannons are still quite heavy. And what happens is the tide turns. So these forts, they start developing within the space of about 30 years of the introduction of mobile cannons into the battlefield. By the late 1400s and early 1500s, this is what is happening. And then what happens is they start improving. This is the fort of Bourtange. Look how complicated this is getting.
Okay, this is really intricate.
Extremely. So, you remember how we saw in Crac des Chevaliers, if you took the outer wall, it was complete misery for you because the defenders would then keep attacking you from inside. Here, if you took any single outer wall, see, there's no protection for you there. Everybody else can fire at you from bloody 100 different angles.
Man, how much planning would go in these people designing these things?
Exactly. So, see, this is the beginning of the application of science. This is the beginning of this is why it is called the Renaissance. It is not the art. For me, it is the military fortification that defines the Renaissance. ठीक है ना? So, these are extremely, it made taking a fort. Now, here's the funny thing. Look at the ratio of fortification to size. Look how small the fort actually is. The actual city, the town is. But look how big the fort is. The fort is almost 2 to 3 times the size of the actual population. Right? So they are
You know
following that
what I
same.
have noticed in both the last two images that you have shared is that
Hmm.
they're not very tall buildings. Like in the other forts, they're very tall and the height is
Exactly.
more. These
So,
are
so
not very
why?
tall buildings. They're just spread out
Right.
more.
Now, what happens is in a tall building, if you have a gun, it's hitting it direct, 90-degree
Yeah.
impact. It's like full blown impact, car on car
But
impact.
so they adjusting to the improving technology of the cannons in terms of distance and ability to hit.
Exactly. So what they're doing is doing two things. Let me bring up this image again. Botage number 2. Let me bring up this image. इसमें क्या है कि see it is sunk. So it is doing two things. First, it is using the ground. Remember, this isn't rock. This isn't concrete. This is they're using earth. It's mud that they're using as a soft crumple zone for it to absorb cannon. It is sunk low down so that the cannons can't even aim properly. Agar if you're high up, what happens is the cannon has a clear line of sight. But if you're only assume, isko kaise karu? Okay, see, this is ground, this is the wall. At this point, the cannon has a clear line of sight. But if you're hidden here, just this much, and the cannon is here, it can't really, targeting becomes a huge issue because most of it is hidden and it's covered in mud and things like that. So it becomes a huge issue. Okay? They're thinking about everything. Now, this is very counterintuitive. We would normally think height would be a guarantor of defense. They've overcome that thinking. They think आगे से लोगों पे फेंकना अच्छा चीज है. No, they're thinking star forts. So when you're attacking this, the wall does not defend itself. It is the wall facing that wall that defends it. Because then you're attacking people from the behind. It is a lot of counterintuitive thinking going on, which shows you how much science is starting to get applied by the 1400s and 1500s on these problems. Now, I want to show you. अच्छा ये भी देख लो. This is a slightly bigger fort, but this is one of the more developed. This is a later fort, say about 1600s. Can you see the kind of thought that is going in here? Basically, a defender of this fort could come all the way out to the outer defenses without ever facing a single bullet from the enemy. Not one single bullet. And Vienna, when it was besieged, the siege of Vienna, it actually had a very similar defense. Now you can't see the old walls of Vienna anymore. They got destroyed, but there was Kahlenberg Fortress outside that played the same role. So remember, they're doing what the Crusaders did, which is if the cost of defending the city is too high, have lots of chota forts which are cheaper to build around it, from where the attacker can never be safe. He will be attacked from the city and he will be attacked from outside the city. You don't see this thought going in India. They fortify the cities. They are not creating these small fortresses. They're not putting any kind of thought into it. Let me give you a simple example of this. Okay. This is Chittorgarh Fort in its final form. This final marammat of this was done around the 1500s. Right, 1556 or something was the last siege, or 1560, I forget. Look at it. Does this look like a fort?
But I
1560, does
have a
it look modern
query.
enough to you?
This
Yeah,
looks like something on some sort of a mountaintop or something or a hill, but that's on the land. Would
correct.
that also? Yeah.
Yeah, it's on the mountain top, which is actually making it a bigger target for cannon.
Got
So
it.
it's actually extremely foolish. Notice, Crac de Chevalier is on top of a mountain. But the fortresses of Palmanova and Burtanj that I showed you are depressed into the ground on flat plain land.
Okay.
Here, you're literally presenting a target to the cannon.
Mm-hmm.
So it's so foolish on so many things that it hasn't developed at all in keeping in touch with the development of firearms. Now, there is an excuse for this because I've shown you how the guns of this period were. They were completely unusable. So maybe nobody could actually bring up guns properly to the walls to bombard them properly. So a rudimentariness of fortress planning is accompanied by a rudimentariness of the cannons used. Okay, na? Let me show you other forts. This is Mehrangarh, again in its form in the 1400s. Now, if I am a pre-cannon army, I am looking at this going, गई भैंस पानी में, अब कुछ नहीं होने वाला है, हजारों लोग मरने वाले हैं. If I am a cannon army, I am looking at this thinking, किस उल्लू के पट्टे ने बनाया है, मैं इसको बस 2 दिन में ले सकता हूँ. 2 दिन तो छोड़ो, 2 घंटे में ले सकता हूँ इसे.
This is like a easy target which has written in big caps, hit me.
Yeah, exactly. It's even by the time it is built, it is obsolete. Okay, this is how bad your this thing is. Now, this is Rana Kumbha's fort called Kumbhalgarh, built in the late 1460 or something like that. Well, 1450, 1460. Look at this. Look how obsolete it is by this point. It's absorbed none. And mind you, these were the same Turks who were attacking, who were defending the Holy Land in the 1100s. You are facing the same Turkish tactics 300 years later, but you are building forts where even ancient Egyptian forts from 3000 years before this were superior to you. This is what Rana Kumbha builds. It is that obsolete. It also shows you how late cannons are coming into India. It shows you if the cannons come in, they are not very well thought out. They are badly misused, the same way we misuse cavalry, the way we misuse elephants. We don't know how to use them properly. Imagine having such an obsolete fort, but you still go there, they'll say, oh, sir, please look at Kumbhalgarh, the second longest wall in the world after the Great Wall of China. So much money wasted on a completely tactically inutile piece of work. Now, do you understand why Rajputana, the forts just used to keep falling, and keep falling to the Mughals?
So what happens is that so what could have been the reasons then? I mean, just out of curiosity, that we were so insulated to technological development.
I don't know, but clearly there is not enough scientific thinking happening. Now, see, I'm building up a pattern. If you combine this with the horse video, what did we see in the horse video? They weren't doing their economics. They were going on focusing on horse. Here, the fort simply is not changing. Now, let me tell you what the problem is. The star forts that I showed you, the smaller forts, they were 9 to 15 times more expensive to build than larger forts, than the older forts. Which means at this point of time in Europe, there's a massive increase in wealth that has happened. Right? The 13th century was full of the plague. You can all read Barbara Tuchman's A Calamitous 14th Century, which is the 1300s basically. But in the 1400s and 1500s, recovery is so rapid, they have so much money that they can build these star fortresses, which are 9 to 15 times more expensive, depending on the kind of the extra bells and whistles that you go in for. Right? In India, we're still not thinking on those lines. And see, there is an economics to defense. Why are these people building these small forts all around? Remember, if a city is about 30 to 50,000 people strong, the general equation is it can mobilize about 5 to 10,000 defenders. 5,000 crack troops, 10,000 defenders, if all the able-bodied people, including the women and children, are put to work in rotation at a time. On the other hand, if the attacking army is about 15 to 30,000, that entire army is dedicated towards just attacking. There is not an inutile population living inside the fort. But Indians are only thinking of protecting their entire population centers in a very bad way. They're not even thinking of these small forts outside to both draw the enemy away from the city or to act as a redundancy measure from which you can keep attacking the attacking force and keep it on guard perpetually. Look at the level at which Europeans are thinking at this stage. They're thinking in terms of economics. They're thinking in terms of, see, the attacking force is 30,000 strong. We can't allow it to be 30,000 strong. We need to have 7 or 8 minor forts around the major city so that they will have to keep breaking up their army into 2,000, 2,000, 2,000 to deal with each fort. Otherwise, we can always come out of our fort and attack them. They're looking very strategically at reducing the size of the attacking army, at splitting up the attacking army, at how to prevent cannons so they're depressing their forts, etc., 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 etc. Okay, now I want you to see something. Why do you build it on flat land and not say on top of a hill like this? Very simple. If you build it on top of a hill, a cannon can kind of peek a boo at you here. Sorry, let me do this here. This cannon here can peek a boo at you and it keeps shooting, and you suffer from a negative consequence that you can't see this guy properly. So he's a smaller target and you are a huge target. So the first star fort that is built in India is built by Tipu Sultan, first and only, I think, well, by an Indian ruler. And it is such a complete disaster. It is built in the 1700s. Okay, late 1700s. And look at this idiot. He's built a star fort in the 1700s. By this time, by the way, star forts have started becoming obsolete even in Europe. Because what had happened was Louis XIV's engineer Vauban, he had already figured out ways of overcoming the star fortress. Now look at this man. He builds a star fort on top of a hill. The one thing which you're never meant to do. You're never meant to do this, and yet he does this. It has none of the double walls, the moats, and things like that to protect it. He's wasted money on a completely inutile fort again. And mind you, even in the 1700s, we are doing this. This is number 2. Look at this. I've shown you how many extra battlements European forts built 200 years earlier have. Look at this fort here. बस एक wall है. ये एक wall पार कर दिया, then you're inside. That's it. Finished.
Yeah, it's very fascinating because in the other star forts you showed, there was like a 3-point protection and 3-point from 2-3 angles, and this is like no single angle, 1 point, 1 wall kind of a thing.
Correct. Now imagine even at the peak of the gunpowder era, even Chhatrapati Shivaji was not planning his forts properly. This is Raigad. Okay. You can literally pummel it with cannons left, right, and center. Single wall. Again, I think what saved these forts like Raigad and Pratapgarh were the fact that they were the cannons used were completely useless cannons.
Also, like could it be that Shivaji had better war strategy in comparison to others?
See, he focused on guerrilla tactics. He was all about
right. That's what I was hinting at, basically. So for guerrilla tactics, he could actually neutralize a lot of his enemies.
Look, he was a brilliant strategist and tactician, but he was not an engineer. He depended on engineers to build forts, and clearly his engineers weren't up to speed on what was happening in the world.
Mm-hmm.
This is Pratapgarh Fort. Again, if you had come with this, see, Aurangzeb was a highly incompetent guy as well, because Aurangzeb was just as backward as Shivaji's engineers were. Okay. So they wouldn't have come up with the small cannon strategy that was used 200 years earlier by the French. Honestly, if they'd used even 200-year-old cannons on this fort, it wouldn't have lasted for more than about 2 days maximum.
Mm. Okay, I have two, three questions, and then maybe I'll start asking you the questions of. Ek minute, sorry. Yeah, sorry. I thought I removed your screen, and by the time you had shocked your screen share. Okay, so let me see. Abhijit,
Okay,
you're
this
frozen. Ah, now you're fine.
I'm okay.
Yeah, now you're fine.
One
Fine.
second. Okay, let me just get rid of all the images that I don't need. 1 second,
Okay, yeah.
because I've got
And then
very
you
little.
share the screen again. And by the way, people, I'm not going to do an audio version of this. It is pointless. There are so many images. If you don't see the video version, you don't understand it anyway.
Exactly. And 1 second, I want to show you 2, 3 other things. Let me just get rid of this because it's too much crap.
Yeah.
Okay, this is a very important fort. It's Devagiri Fort, also called
Share screen
Daulatabad.
again, Abhijit. You had stopped your share screen. Share
Oh,
screen again.
okay. Sorry. Second.
Somebody just wrote, by calling Aurangzeb incompetent, Abhijit is hurting Audrey's sentiments.
Well, I mean, I hope I hurt her sentiments.
That's funny.
Okay, now this is. Can you see my screen now?
Yeah, I can see it. Enlarge the photo. I'll put it up.
Okay. This is Devagiri Fort, also known as Daulatabad, where Muhammad bin Tughlaq shifted his capital. This is the citadel of the fort. This is actually impressive, but look at the human amount of work that went in there. They've literally carved out the side of the hill to make the wall and an extremely deep moat around it. This is a truly, if you've actually been here, tum hakka bukka reh jaoge.
To get what you're saying exactly, I just want to be very precise. So what you're saying is that militarily, tactics wise, very good fort in terms of protective measures, but the capital influx required to build something like this for that time and the economic impact would be too much.
No, what I'm saying is Indian forts by this time,
Uh-huh.
starting, well, look, we don't have pre-Muslim forts in existence, particularly good pre-Muslim forts in existence. But if you start looking from Muslim forts onwards, the pre-Muslim forts that I have been to are extremely low level. They are obsolete, even by their standards. I haven't been able to get good pictures of them, but even the Muslim forts are obsolete by the standards of their time.
Mm-hmm.
And once gunpowder comes into the equation, that obsolescence just keeps growing. You're going from obsolescence to even more obsolescence to even more obsolescence to even more obsolescence.
Got it.
They are extremely impressive forts visually. They require a huge amount of human effort. But it's a white elephant because you're putting effort into something that is militarily useless.
Got
In
it.
the 1700s, you are building a fort. This is the worst fort of the lot because let me show you this. This is Jaigarh Fort which is Jaipur Fort as you know it. Uh, 1 second. Okay. Can you share this image, please?
Mm-hmm.
This is built in
Fort
1726.
Hey, it looks good. I don't know about the military value.
It looks fantastic. It is militarily completely useless.
Yeah. So basically, we were good at aesthetics. Everything else was basically bollocks.
Complete bollocks. So you see this decline I'm talking about since about 500 AD onwards, definitely by 700 AD onwards. It's getting worse and worse and worse. And the cost of fortifications is increasing. We neither have the science nor the scientific thinking. And this is both Muslims and Hindus. Both. I'm not saying the Hindus were inferior to the Muslims out here. Both, all Indians at this point of time, whether they thought of themselves as Indians or not, but people living in India at this point of time were obsolete beyond belief. Even by this time, we are 200-300 years behind Europe. Europe's lead is already decisive by 1450 in purely military terms. So when they actually come here, we're a bunch of sitting ducks. 1720 में you're building a fort that got obsolete in Europe in 1450. Well, 1420. Imagine, this is the same fort that houses that big cannon I showed you. Okay? So it's becoming very, very problematic out here. Now, this is another fort I want to show you how bad we're actually getting. This is Vellore Fort. It's a final iteration done in the 1700s. Can you see it?
Yeah.
Look
this is
how
like that first
obsolete.
fort you showed me.
Exactly. We're building this. So the original part of this was built in the 1500s. This was the improvements done in the 1700s. It's hopelessly obsolete. This is when Tamil Nadu, this is in Tamil Nadu, this is when you're facing the British with all their advanced technology, and you're going back in time. Can you see this thing here, which I showed you in the fortress at Crac de Chevalier, built in the 1100s?
Yes.
You are using fortresses from the 1100s with only one innovation, which is that you're depressing your forts. You're not making them high in the hope that the cannons will not be able to bombard you. You are actually going back in time. The same cyclopean walls. Can you see this?
No, you'll have to enlarge it then.
Okay.
Now it's there.
Same direct walls, straight walls, etc., etc., etc. They're horribly obsolete. Look at this. This is something you would see in Europe like 500-600 years before, when this should have been built. Look at the amount of money that is being wasted on useless things like horses and forts like this. The scientific process, as you can see in India at this point, has stopped in its entirety. Very clearly. There is no thought being given to anything. This is actually a sketch of how Vauban thought about his forts. So can you see this outer thing? It's earthwork. Anybody firing cannon here, this acts like your crumple zone. It absorbs the blow. ठीक है? उसके बाद अगर तुम इधर अटैक करोगे, तुमको दोनों साइड, आगे पीछे दोनों से शूट किया जाएगा, इधर से भी तुमको शूट किया जाएगा. Here there will be a little gate, so even when somebody is coming out of the gate from here, he is protected by this wall. It's extremely, they are thinking ahead of you by 300-400 years at this point of time. There is no comparison left to be done. That is how backward we have become. ठीक है ना? अब ये screen sharing हटा दें. Now I want to go through some of the reasons of why this is happening. Okay. The first thing is the market fragmentation that happens in, and this is a simultaneous process that is happening in Europe and India. 1300s, there is a massive fragmentation happening. in both Europe and in India, each feudal lord has small fiefdoms. Feudalization means that it is not a coherent empire. So when you say the Delhi Sultanate and they show you land area, remember the Sultan didn't control that area. It was a low-end state like we discussed. And each guy was powerful. He owned about 30, 40, 3,000 acres of land maximum, which wasn't enough to sustain. You see de-urbanization, which means there is no wealth creation. But what happens in Europe is surprisingly, because of the Crusades and the shipping, they start opening long-distance trade. So what happens in the 1400s and 1500s is, even though the feudal patterns continue, merchant guilds start becoming much more powerful. Capitalists start becoming more rich than feudal lords. And that is where the big trading cities become. And trading cities get special concessions because they're not under a feudal lord. They come directly under the British king or the French king or the Habsburg emperor. They are not answerable to any local feudal lord. So there's a great consistency of policy happening. So the business environment for growth is happening out here. The regulatory systems are predictable. Policy decisions are predictable. It is not a feudal lord running out of money and then coming and, raping all the women and killing all the children and taking away what you do. It is now very tightly controlled by the king. So what you see happening in the 14 and 1500s is a centralization of power in Europe, the reversal of feudalism happening in Europe, which doesn't happen in India till the British come. Even the Mughal Empire wasn't that centralized. So long distance trade, private wealth growing, and centralization, they provide the wealth for these star forts, because like I said, these star forts are 9 to 15 times more expensive. It is that wealth generation coming out of European shipping, European long distance trade, and imperial control that begins to reverse feudalization, which then provides the money for defense of these cities and things like that, where the fortifications are improving manifold. And urbanization, the more big cities that keep growing, the more revenue, the less money in the hands of feudal lords, the more money in the hands of the emperor or king, as opposed to feudal lords. It skews the balance completely. In India, we don't have that. Right up to the 1757. You look at the Battle of... tell me, Kushal, why is it that in Europe, very frequently in the feudal period, you will see a feudal lord abandons his king and joins the opposition. ये Battle of Plassey में भी यही हुआ था ना. One arm of the army betrayed Siraj-ud-Dawla and joined the British. Why is it that completely stops by the 1500s in Europe? Because the feudal lords no longer have any money to do that kind of shit. But in India, it is happening right up to the 1800s. That is how backward we are. You see the pattern now. We discussed this with horses, the mental obsolescence, the scientific obsolescence, the lack of wealth. Europe at this point is growing in wealth. Europe at this point is growing in science. Consistent patterns that you see across every element of warfare and urban living. ठीक है ना? Now, we need to remember what accelerated this process. So, there's a very interesting guy, the Vauban guy that I showed you, who talked about क्या कहते हैं, who talked about who basically designed the ultimate evolution of those forts.
Acha, Abhijit, you're not going to share any image, right?
No, I'm not sharing images anymore.
हाँ, तो stop कर दे screen sharing तेरे end में, so it will speed up your video free.
Oh, okay.
Now.
Is this fine?
Good.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Right. So what happens is that this chap Vauban, who pioneered both the destruction of forts ultimately and the ultimate evolution of the fort, he had a very, very interesting saying, right, which was more powder, less blood. More powder, less blood. Use more gunpowder, lose less lives. Okay, more powder, less blood. Very important. Why? There was a sheer force of nature that made that happen. Because what happens in the 1300s and early 1400s? The plague, the Black Plague. Almost 60%, in some tellings, almost 60% of Europe's population gets wiped out. So the value of human labor goes through the roof. Now see what I keep saying, invest in human beings. Don't invest in buildings, invest in human beings. That's what you're seeing out here. If we keep investing in human beings, there it becomes automatic in a sense that the value of labor goes up.
So you have to technologically improve yourself.
You have to technologically improve yourself. So a lot of what happens in terms of the Reformation, that is to say Martin Luther and the peasant revolts of Germany, is because the feudal lords are trying to reassert control, because by the 1500s, the population has bounced back to the 1200s level. And the feudal lords want, because they've consistently lost bargaining power of the last 200 years because of the bubonic plague population wipeout, they now want a renegotiation of terms, which the peasants don't want, which is why the peasant rebellions. But by this time, it's already too late. The peasant rebellions are kind of futile in the end, because it's now not the peasants determining the future of Europe. It is the merchant class determining the future of Europe.
Got it.
Because of the transatlantic and the long-range trade. Right? So understand, there were a lot of things. Everything, like I say, is intersectional. Maybe without the bubonic plague, this would not have happened. But
which is what I was saying, that it was their technological development was by a sheer accident of nature.
It is not a sheer accident. It is not a sheer accident, because remember, we had severe stretches of bubonic plague in India as well. Right? So why then didn't these things? We used to have terrible famines during the Muslim period, which would have wiped out large sections of the population. Why didn't that readjustment happen? See, it's many things have to align all at the same time.
Well, in India, I guess we can always say the caste structure would always come in between, right?
Well, it's one of the things that would come in between. But the caste is, I suspect, the original determinant where you've already made yourself, in addition to feudalism, as it is, a little feudal fiefdom is economically unsustainable. But then because of caste, you've further divided yourself and you've made yourself even more unsustainable. So it's one, but it's not the only thing.
Yeah, so it's
because
like
remember, we have traders.
What happens with hierarchies in India, right? You add a class divide and you add another divide within that divide, which creates it a little more problematic.
It's class plus caste. And sometimes caste trumps class.
Yeah, which is crazy.
In Europe, you could buy your way out of poverty. You could become an extremely rich merchant, and an impoverished nobleman would marry his daughter off to you in the hope of getting some money to maintain his castle. And you then become a lord. So in the 1400s and 1500s, remember, from the 700s to the 1300s, the social structure in Europe was very rigid, just like Indian caste. The lower classes, again, Barbara Tuchman, The Calamitous 14th Century, the lower classes, they could not even wear certain colors of clothes because these were reserved for nobility. By the 14th and 15th century, that's breaking down so rapidly because the feudal lords have no money left. It's all gone to the merchant class. So there are these huge tectonic. So understand how things happen. There are completely lateral things, intersectional things, which ultimately determine how military advances also happen. This is why I keep telling you, when people ask me questions, Abhijit, should we buy F-16 over Gripen? And I keep saying, boss, it doesn't matter what you buy, you're still not going to buy your way out of this. It's like buying horses in a sense. So if I'm showing you the futile economics of the war horse in one video, in this video, I'm showing you why and how complex the reasons for that European technological advance become. And it's not that India could do it if it wanted to. It fundamentally, the scientific change had become so great. You were simply not applying your mind to the problem. So when people say there was no requirement for it, it's like saying, मेरा बच्चा गोलगप्पा मैथ्स में गोलगप्पा मिल रहा है उसको, बट वो तो टीचर का कसूर है. शी इज नॉट स्टिमुलेटिंग हिम इनफ सो दैट ही डेवलप्स द मेंटल फैकल्टीज टू बी एबल टू स्कोर अ सेंटर. यहाँ बहुत सारी आंटियां करती हैं, पता है. जब किसी का बच्चा का 9 out of 100 आ जाता है, वो मेरा बच्चा तो बहुत स्मार्ट है भाईजान, वो ना वो टीचर को दिया है, उसको पता नहीं है मेरे बच्चे का यूनिक जीनियस कैसे उसको ले आना है, bring
In
out
fact,
करना है.
one more thing that people don't realize is a lot of times we talk about the, you know, that GDP figure, but what nobody wants to talk about is, even if that share of GDP figure is discussed, what we need to talk about is, like in the Mughal case, data is more robust. I know pre-Mughal data is not as robust as, since the Mughals, like, where was the money concentrated in, even during those times, right? The money was concentrated very much into the higher classes of that society. It
So
was
in the
not there.
Mughal period, if you go to Abraham Erali, you see 70% of the Mughal economy was in the hands of 655 noble families. That's it. Can you believe that? Just 655 noble families.
It's insane.
So you had a very high per capita income theoretically, except the Gini coefficient was extraordinarily ridiculous. Sir Thomas Roe, and remember I showed you how by this point of time, by the 1400s and 1500s, Britain had 3 times the level of per capita income that India had. Real per capita income was 3 times that of India.
Yeah.
See, you can say my economy is bigger than Luxembourg economy. Luxembourg kaun hai? But Luxembourg has a per capita income of $80,000-$90,000 per capita. You have a per capita income of $2,000. So obviously in Luxembourg, they lead a better life. Right?
Yeah.
And by this time, the legal protections in Britain and France were so strong. One of the reasons in the 1600s that the revolt happens against King Charles and King Charles is executed is because he is flouting the norms of a trial that every man is entitled to. That is why he is known as a tyrant. You simply can't execute people without a trial. In India, right up to 1800, you're doing summary execution. So in every form and way, please understand, I don't think people understand this. By the 1400s and 1500s, it doesn't matter. Even a great Hindu empire like the Eastern Gangas in Odisha or the Ahoms in Assam or the Vijayanagar Empire, they were just as mentally backward as the Muslims nearby. For a variety of reasons that I've tried to explain to you. I've tried to use a fortress architecture as a segue to explain how the social changes were happening in the 1500s or vice versa, depending on what you're more interested in. Because you need to understand why the things that happen to you. So it's painful when people can't see these things happening. We keep misdiagnosing problems, and I bet you comment section में क्या आने वाला है, ये गंजा मोटा होमो चूतिया है, ये इसको कुछ नहीं पता है, ये he is look at this one fort, look at that one fort. Okay, best of luck.
Okay, no, now I'll ask questions. Actually, अच्छे questions भी आए हैं, Abhijit. Actually, they're very good questions. So a lot of them are repetitive. Like I think 2-3 people asked that Shivaji Fort question. I guess they must have joined the chat before we you were commenting on the Shivaji's fort sections. And in fact, the only person whom
Look,
Abhijit was
let's be
charitable
clear
to.
about Shivaji. Shivaji was a brilliant tactician and strategist. He was not a fort designer.
And
his
that
fort
was not his
designers
job,
were,
right? He was a king, right? He
exactly,
must have allocated it to experts.
exactly, and those
Yeah.
experts went very good. They were the best he
In
could
fact,
get.
Yeah, they let him down, right?
They let him down.
Yes. And imagine the greatness of Shivaji is with such mediocre experts, he still was a pain in the ass
He
of the
still
Mughals.
managed to do it. Why? He had to use his tactics and strategy to substitute for the idiots he employed.
That's true. Which makes Shivaji even greater because he was working
Yeah,
with what he had.
exactly. Yeah. See, this is why, understand, this is why Shivaji is such a great ruler.
Yeah.
He always played to his strengths. He never played to his weaknesses. He's like, देखो, मैंने चूतियों चुन चुन के चूतियों को रखा है अपने फोर्ट्स बिल्ड करने के लिए, तो मैं फोर्ट्रेस वॉरफेयर नहीं करने वाला हूँ, मैं ऑफेंसिव कैवलरी वॉरफेयर करने वाला हूँ एंड ऑफेंसिव इन्फेंट्री वॉरफेयर गेरिल्ला वॉरफेयर करने वाला हूँ. And he did it.
True. All right. Now let me ask some questions. I'll use random questions, all related to architecture, forts, and all that stuff. So somebody has asked. I think this is more of a query. Someone has said, but how would you decide how to space the forts to account for the expansion of cities? Is the first part. Even at a slower pace, cities must have expanded, right? So how did they design the fort? Like cities would go on expanding. That's an interesting question, right?
That is, so what would happen is, uh, uh, only your core infrastructure would be kept within the city. All the lower class tenements would be outside the city, because it was a question of what is disposable and what is not disposable. So, in no fortress that you see in either olden times, never. I know you all watch Hollywood movies where they show you all these cities, or Bollywood movies where they show you as the entire fortress encapsulating the entire population. That was never the case. In every single case, except the medieval period, possibly, about 2/3 of the population lived outside the fort, especially the poor people, who would come inside the fort during a siege, which was why terror tactics used to be used for a very long time, because once you swell the fort, it places an extraordinary strain on the food resources and reserves and things like that. Which is why building these small ancillary forts, very powerful ancillary forts outside a city, was so smart, because people couldn't be forced in there. They were only meant to be forts.
And on the other way around, when you read history, you often hear cases of before approaching a fort, they laid siege on this area, which would be that extension outside the fort, right?
Correct. And they would do it to drive the entire population into the fort.
Hmm.
Disease badega, resources on food and water badega, etc., etc., etc.
Got it.
The
Got it. Got it.
Mongols perfected it, because they used to depopulate entire areas and drive them into the forts.
Hmm. All right. There was this question on ossification of society. We've already spoken about the ossification bit. Now, I did not understand this, so I want to ask you this. So, someone has maybe done a request. It's a request for a podcast, but I'm going to make it into a question. Is like, can you request Abhijit to do a podcast about Arab invasions into India before Turks, and how will we able to prevent them and not the Turks?
Mm. I thought of doing that. The problem was I just have not been able to find sources.
Okay.
I've exhausted my JSTOR access. I'm simply not able to get. Uh, the writing is extremely sketchy. I've asked all my satellite imagery analysts to keep looking over forts and things like that. I've emailed lots of professors, asking them, please give me some clues and things. Totally, I've only got about 30, 40 pages of material, completely incomplete. Most of it is duplication. There's just not enough information on it. And I don't want to do a podcast on a topic where I'm simply not able to extract or access information.
Got it. Got it. Got it. Now, I think these questions are related, but I'll read them out if you feel like adding something. So I'll read both of them out. Like, why didn't Indians like the Japanese learn European methods in military technology and architecture? And one is like, was it due to military? Was it due to because of the military? I guess he's trying to say was seen as a religious science as Dhanurveda. So we were like always stuck with that religious bit. I think what the person is trying to say is that the first one is like, why didn't we do it what the way the Japanese did, and as the second one is
Right.
like, in India, the texts were so vast. Like there was the secular element in it, there was a religious element in it, and always it was controlled by a certain class, and maybe that was a hindrance in class caste both in
Mm.
adapting new technologies, because the orthodoxy never likes suggestions, right?
Right. So, look, it's a very interesting thing, and I never thought of it, but since he brought it, it's now triggering certain synaptic responses in my mind. Remember, Japan was an extraordinarily stratified society. You could not become a samurai if you were a peasant.
Yeah, in fact, they were
So it
even
was kind of
more
like a
casteist
caste.
than us at one
They
point of time, right?
much more, they still
Yeah.
are. Do you know that? Here, at least, you have the SC/ST Act. There, butchers and people like that are still treated like dirt, and they are the ones who provided the most manpower for Yakuza. There is a reason Yakuza are considered dirty, is because they come from the butcher class and the undertaker class and things like that. Here, if you use certain words, you will be thrown in jail. In Japan, you will not only not be thrown in jail, they do not even acknowledge that the discrimination exists to this day. You know, at one of my friends' houses in Japan, this guy was just shocked that I'd asked the butcher into the house. He actually got upset with me that I'd let the butcher into the house because the butcher had told me, he was going to deliver these steaks to me at home. घर के अंदर नहीं आने देते. Can you believe that?
It's crazy. Insane people.
Now, Japan, let's go back. The Japanese are very militarily focused, much smaller land. Think of it as half the size of Rajasthan at the moment, with a elite military class whose only job is to fight. So look at the way they deal with the Mongol invasions. They defeat the Kublai Khan's invasion not once but twice, and each time they defeat it better than the last time. When Commodore William Perry comes in the 1800s and threatens with his cannon, within 50 years, they have learned what to do and they turn the tables. And in 1905, they defeat a big European power called Russia at the naval battle of Tsushima. And this is just 50 years after they were forced to open up their ports to the Americans under Commodore Perry. They keep showing signs of having a single-minded focus. They record, they transmit information. Remember, the recording and transmitting of information is an extremely important thing, which is not done very well in India. You go to Japan, you go to China, you go to Europe, you can pick up documents dating from thousands of years back. People know where these documents exist. They are widely circulated. They always were. In India, it simply wasn't done. We don't know why this is. Knowledge preservation and knowledge transmission, except of religious texts, seems non existent. The way, imagine if military knowledge had spread across India, the way the Vedas, the Upanishads, and the holy texts had spread. Why did they not?
Mm-hmm.
Right. When Rajendra Chola and Rajaraja Chola are able to build ships and power project 3,000 kilometers out to Vijayanagar, why is no other kingdom trying to find out how these guys are doing this and copying it?
Mm-hmm.
It's fundamentally problematic, right? So
Mm-hmm.
understand there are certain social trends. I still don't know. I've been trying to search. And I don't want to do a bullshit podcast with you because I still haven't found the reasons of why for the last 1,500 years, pretty much, we've become
Mm-hmm.
such an ossified society. Japan is ossified, and yet their military class seems to be able to problem solve. Why are we not able to do that?
I
It's
don't know.
problematic, right?
I guess they're a relatively smaller society. What I tend to observe is sometimes when you want to have certain changes in smaller numbers, you can do it. But at such a large number with our society, I think these changes are just more tougher. Also, they are a more
Possibly.
homogenous society.
They actually were not. The northern part of Honshu, which is the middle big island, the northern half, in fact, was Ainu, who are technically not Sinitic at all. They are actually kind of semi-Caucasoid, right up to the 1600s, 1700s almost.
Mm-hmm.
The northern island of Hokkaido wasn't colonized properly till the 1700s and homogenized till much later.
Mm-hmm.
So, fine, you're only working with two communities out there, right? Maybe homogenization, but see, I've heard this excuse. For example, what was the war horse episode about? You hear that war horses gave them an advantage, but you didn't understand how the dynamics of that advantage played out, which I tried to explain to you. I
Mm-hmm.
have not yet read anything that suitably demonstrates to me how that homogenization helps in advancement.
Fair enough. Fair enough. Okay. So, okay, Shivaji Fort's question was done. That was already answered. Okay, this one I did not understand this question. I genuinely don't understand it. A lot of questions were about our, societal ossification. We've dealt with that too. So, this is were the fortifications of Delhi any use during the 1857 revolt?
Really good question. They were a joke. They were an
Interesting.
absolute and utter joke. Remember, Red Fort was built by Shah Jahan in what, 1650, 1660? And you just
Mm-hmm.
need to go to see Red Fort that it was a joke. It took up what, almost 10 crores of imperial finances, which was what, 60, 70% of your national budget on an ornamental fort that had absolutely no military value.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, in the 1857 revolt, it was not the actual fortifications of the Red Fort, because remember, by 1857, nobody was building forts anymore. Well, not
Mm-hmm.
proper forts at any rate. It was barricades and things like that, and mud trenches almost that were used. So it wasn't the Red Fort or the fortifications of Delhi that were actually used. It was the sort of new improvised earthenwork fortifications outside that were shielded and this thing. And even that, the Indian fortifications weren't very good that were used.
Okay. So, this question is. This is interesting, actually. I'll just read it. I don't know. It's more like a comment. How much influence and financial patronage did the church play in the development of military architecture compared to, let's say, the temples and the priestly class in India?
Zero, almost zero. This is when the faith in the church has been completely lost. Remember, the bubonic plague really shook up the mind of Europeans. They lost faith in the church, which is why the Reformation, Martin Luther, Calvinism, this, that, all of that starts happening. So the
Hmm.
church's contribution to this is next to zero,
Got it. Got it. Okay.
except maybe that the church preserved older Roman works on fortifications and things like that, which was a starting point. But remember, there's real innovation happening out here, and all of it is happening completely outside the churches.
Mhm. Got it. Okay, this one I don't understand again this question because I'm not a history buff. But how was George Washington with inferior military able to defeat the far superior British military during the American Revolutionary War then?
Same as Shivaji, tactics, tactics, tactics.
All right, smart tactics. Okay.
Okay. Very
Okay.
smart tactics. And remember, uh, America at this point, the American landowners and slave owners, remember all these guys who fought. Thomas Jefferson was the second biggest slave owner in America.
Mhm.
Okay. George Washington was a slave owner. They were extremely rich. They had huge amounts of disposable income. They had industrialized themselves because they were seen as British.
Mhm.
So Indians who were not investing in multiple machine factories to produce lots of cannon and lots of guns, that wasn't the problem in Europe. Remember, Americans as a colony, white Americans were treated far, far better than brown Indians were. White Americans benefited from full transfer of technology and the building of industrial infrastructure in America at that point. It was a fight between equals. plus better use of tactics.
Hmm.
Cornwallis was an idiot. Uh, again, to draw a Shivaji parallel, Shivaji was also lucky that he had someone as incompetent as Aurangzeb, and George Washington was particularly gifted to have somebody like a dunce like Cornwallis. And how does Cornwallis get rewarded? He gets sent back to India as Governor General all over again, and he
All right.
dies one day into his Governor Generalship.
This question is very interesting. So, if we were to look at these parallels of the ancient past when it comes to architecture and stuff like that, do you think these kinds of mistakes are still being made by the Indian Armed Forces in terms of
Yeah,
strategic planning?
yeah,
So, it's
a
a very
lot.
good question. I love this question.
That's a very good question, and I think I've answered it before. In the War Horse episode, I think a similar question was asked. You
Hmm.
see the same thing happening. You want to buy these foreign things that you can't use, you can't afford, you don't know how to use, you don't have all the corollary infrastructure to run it. You're not investing in human beings, you're investing in platforms. You are not doing economies of scale, etc., etc., etc. Every single parallel that I've done on war horses, on military architecture, you are seeing it even today. It is pathological.
Hmm. All right. Again, this is a request to you. I don't know because my job is to relay the message to you. Somebody has requested. Please consider doing an episode on Christendom's fight with Islam compared to Hindus. Why was one more successful, and the reasons for it. That this is a request by
I
someone.
actually have a lot of material on that. I think, uh, yeah, sure. That's a good one.
I'll DM it to you. मैं तेरे को
Kushal.
DM कर देता हूँ. Okay, I'll
Please.
DM it to you. Okay, so this one again, this is more like a fort question, a very technical question. So I think this is directly in your field. Is the Agra fort a good fort as it was surrounded by a river and walls are very steep? And why was the Taj Mahal built out of a fort?
See, Taj Mahal is not critical infrastructure. It doesn't need to be built inside a fort.
Okay.
Okay, like I said, forts protected critical infrastructure.
Hmm.
Chittorgarh Fort, if you look at it, the problem with Chittorgarh Fort is a lot of what is protected within Chittorgarh Fort is not critical infrastructure.
Hmm.
The one critical infrastructure outside there, which is the well, is actually at the edge of the fort, the big pool, almost like an infinity pool out there. No, but Agra Fort still had direct 90-degree walls. It's as useless a fort as the Red Fort in Delhi. It's a terrible,
All right.
it's an
Okay.
ornamental fort.
Another military base. Yeah. Sorry. Sorry. Complete your point.
Let me show you this image. I'm going to share my screen again.
Okay. Cut. When the image comes, I'll put it up.
हाँ ये क्या है tools large images and tools में large
शेयर स्क्रीन करना नहीं भूलना.
हाँ एक सेकेंड sorry 1 second I because this is one of those things which
Trust me, by now people know you suck
no,
at it.
I know ah अबे यार ये क्या है ये what nonsense this is okay and I need to share screen no
Yeah, share screen.
share screen. This is your Disney castle, Neuschwanstein Castle, and you can all see this.
Yes, beautiful
Built in
castle, by the way.
It's beautiful. I've been to this 3 times. I haven't been to it in autumn, but I've been in summer, in winter, and in spring. And each time it's a completely different thrill going. This is what the Disney castle was based on. And this was built by Mad King Ludwig around the 1860s or something like that. It was built purely as a fantasy. It's in 1870 to build a 1860 to build a castle like this is stupid. But
See,
that is
what
what the Red
this
Coat
trait
had.
is, this is the trait of, again, when what we said, peacocking, and when people have fu money, kind of a situation.
Yeah, yeah. By the way, the this became so unpopular. This fort became so unpopular that this king was actually killed. Ludwig, Mad King Ludwig, was killed. He was silently killed off by his own parliament and his probably his father and his wife as well, because they had no time for it. In India, you would not be killed off for doing this.
Hmm.
The extreme wealth capture meant you could get away with anything.
Interesting. Somebody has asked, why did the colonial empire like UK then need the help of America in World War II? I don't know. I
Very, very good question. Because very simply at this point of time, remember, they were a mercantilist empire. They were not a capitalist empire. So what was happening was they were using colonies, they were impoverishing the colonies, preventing them from industrializing, so that they would buy British manufactured goods. The Americans, on the other hand, were true capitalists. They used to kill off Native Americans, that is to say, American Indians. But wherever they would expand, the white man would go, because remember, they first expanded the American land mass, and they would, it was, sabka saath, sabka vikas karte the. So everybody would become rich. The propensity to consume would grow, and every part would industrialize.
Mhm.
Except the South, which focused on the agricultural economy, which is why it lost the Civil War. And then Reconstruction also got aborted, so the South remained very poor for a long time. But other than the 13 southern states, you look at the northern states and the wild, wild west, California and things like that, they industrialized, and how? It was constant wealth, 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 wealth creation. The market size went on expanding, and it became richer and richer to the point where industrialization, by the time of forget the Second World War, even by the time of the First World War, America was way ahead in living standards, and the sheer caliber and volume of industrialization had stripped all European countries by that time.
Good. One last question, and I'm asking this only because I know you will love it, because it's right up your expertise and your field. So somebody has said, do you see parallels like this in cyber infrastructure and its fortification too?
Hmm.
Because you
No.
talk about this all the time with me on offline. The moment I saw it, I was like, you like this question, and this will be the last question, and we'll wrap it up.
Right. No. Cyber fortification is India backward in it? Yes. But no, cyber fortification, I have still not got my head around it, because it is so much more complex than this. I'm looking at things like firewalls and etc., 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 and it's still, I'm still not able. I'm learning something new every single day on cyber attack and cyber fortifications. A cyber attack and cyber fortification is completely disaggregated.
Just one question I have on this. So do you think it is because of
I
the
have time. I have time. I don't have anywhere to go.
the page? No, no, so I have a follow up on this. So do you think that is because, let's say, if we were comparing old school fort technology and all that, the leaps of the speed of the leaps was far slower in comparison to cyber technology, where, let's say, we have something like, what is that called, Moore's law, right? Every year
Yeah,
the
yeah, yeah.
speed keeps on increasing. So when it comes to tech, it's just that the number of variables involved and the speed of the technology is so much that we're just not ever going to be at speed until unless we build a self-governing AI system that literally anticipates it at the speed of the technology rising itself.
So basically, right now we're at the stage where a cyber attack can hit or miss, it's a 50-50 chance. Okay, depending on how coordinated it is. What will change will be quantum computing. But quantum computing is very dangerous because remember, once quantum computing comes, the person who first cracks quantum computing, their ability to protect against cyber attack becomes insurmountable, but their ability to destroy you through cyber attack also becomes unstoppable. And let's be very clear, America is going to get there first. Okay, because then all your encryption, it all goes through the window. Now, this is that same process that we see where the advancement and technology starts diverging around 700 AD. By about 10 to 1100 AD, they are, say, about 100 years ahead of you. But by 1700 AD, they are about 400-500 years ahead of you. That is what quantum technology is going to do. So remember, things like 3D printing and quantum technology, they are going to screw countries like India over in a way we have not ever seen coming. If you think Turkish rule was bad, if you think British rule was bad, you haven't seen anything yet. Just wait with what additive manufacturing and quantum computing do to you.
Well, I think that is the perfect way to wrap today's discussion up. But before we wrap it up, you know what? I think, look, when it comes to looking back at historical figures, these are my views, not Abhijit's, but I think we should always have an open mind that there are many variables that are beyond our control. So what I see, this is not my subject. So actually, I loved it when Abhijit was showing this. I was learning on the go myself. So my whole point is like there are so many questions that maybe we need to ask that, sometimes what happens is we do this, everything goes down to caste. I'm not saying caste was not the problem, it was a humongous problem, but it was one of the variables, is what I've understood. Second is, what also we need to consider is, when we compare, let's say, a small European country, right, or a kingdom, in comparison to, let's say, the landmass in India, how do we do the variable analysis in the scale, is what I don't have these answers. I'm thinking out loud. That was another point that I was kind of thinking about when Abhijit was talking about. Second, income distribution in a society and environmental factors. What happens there? Like Abhijit gave a very good rebuttal to me there, but India also had a bubonic plague. But maybe when did that bubonic plague happen? Where did it happen? And what were the environment factors then? See, I'm going to raise this question. I'm again not attributing this to Abhijit, but how much of this fatalistic thinking that we have in our society, that this is your karma, you suffer, also creates a psychological impact on human beings? Now you may disagree, because I'm a disbeliever. I can look at it and I can talk about these questions, and I know a lot of my viewers, most of them are believers, but I want you to think about it. Does it create some sort of a fatalism in you, where you just tend to accept things far more easily because it is just bad karma? I don't know. Maybe it is, maybe it is not. But I'll leave Abhijit with the last words, and then we'll wrap it up. So, Abhijit, I give it to you.
Thank you. So, look, all my videos are going to be to try to show you not just what happened, but why things happened. Okay. And remember, I'm not going into the kind of depth because I'm trying to make these videos absolutely jargon free as possible. I will tend to generalize certain things because I don't want him to get into the micro nuance and things like that of it. But don't watch these videos unless you're willing to get offended. Okay. Because if you're living in a cozy world where everything was perfect and whatever, these videos clearly aren't for you. Okay. I'm hoping that at least some of you, maybe at least 10% of you will uh, get and start digging deeper and deeper and deeper into what happened. And out of that 10%, even if 1% decide to make a change, that will be a huge thing. And that's kind of what I'm hoping you chaps do. Chaps and chapettes and chapex.
Yep, I agree. Personally, I thoroughly enjoyed today's discussion because this is something I know nothing about. So every time Abhijit speaks, I actually, I'm like a kid in a candy shop. I try and understand what is happening. This is not my field, and philosophy is my field. That I know like the back of my hand. So I understand those things. But this was really interesting. So. I don't know what we're going to talk about next whenever Abhijit and I decide to do these sessions. The whole aim through the Cārvāka podcast is whenever Abhijit and I come together is we should do something that triggers you mentally, not in a negative way but in an inquisitive way, so you get more inquisitive and then you go and so that's the only aim that Abhijit and I have come up with. These sessions, they're long, but you can take 30-minute sections and then you can look at them. So Abhijit, as always, pleasure talking to you. Thanks for coming.
Jai Ram Ji ki.
All right, guys, we'll wrap today's discussion up. Remember, the link to the first two videos in this architecture series is there in the description of the podcast. So if you're suddenly coming on this video and you don't understand what is happening, go and watch video number one, video number two. There are both there in the description of the podcast. I'm not going to make this an audio one because it's pointless. The image is not there. So how am I going to? You're not going to get the experience. So we'll keep this video only so that people can come on YouTube, you can watch it, and you can do it over there. Also, please support the podcast, subscribe to the channel, like the video, leave your comment, support me on YouTube via membership or on Patreon or by the merch or on UPI. I'll see you next time. Until then, namaste, take care. Ta-ta.